court appearance that he was making at the Cook County Criminal Courthouse, and then he was bonded out of the Cook County Jail. For some reason, I was the only reporter there that day, and I was the one who questioned Spilotro, or at least tried to, as he left the jail with his lawyer, Oscar Goodman.
The reputed leader of Las Vegas operations for the Chicago mob walked out of Cook County Jail this afternoon with his brother and 2 attorneys. 44-year-old Anthony Spilotro was released after posting $100,000 in cash, 10% of his $1 million bond. Earlier today in Cook County Criminal Court, Spilotro pleaded not guilty to the May 1962 murders of syndicate soldiers James Miraglia and William McCarthy. The victims of what has become known as the M&M slayings were found in the trunk of a car on the southwest side. Prosecutors say Spilotro beat and slashed the 2 after they allegedly killed 3 other underworld figures in Elmwood Park without permission from mob bosses. The key to Spilotro's indictment nearly 23 years after the fact was information provided by this man, Frank Collada, a mob member turned government informant.
We wouldn't have indicted this individual had we not had enough evidence. We feel we have enough evidence to bring this before a jury, for a jury to return verdicts of guilty on all the charges that he is charged with.
Spilotro's Las Vegas attorney, Oscar Goodman, said his client is being railroaded.
The only thing we're concerned about with Mr. Spilotro is a frame, and that's my only statement.
Spilotro, your attorney says you're being framed. They're setting you up. No comment.
Also today, 47-year-old Cook County Deputy Sheriff John Gattuso is free after posting the required 10% of his $800,000 bond. Gattuso and alleged mob soldier Jasper Campisi, who made bond a few days ago, are charged with the bungled gangland hit last month of Northside gambling boss Ken Tokyo Joe Ito. Some organized crime investigators this evening say they believe Gattuso, Campisi, and Spilotro are all marked men on the street. Gattuso and Campisi because they allegedly botched a syndicate hit. Spilotro because he faces a double murder trial that prosecutors say will end in a conviction. Chuck Gowdy, Channel 7 Eyewitness News.
So there was a lot of talk in 1983 about the possibility that Spilotro was on someone's hit list in the mob because he was out there publicly. Chicago outfit never liked people who were out there publicly and also leading Chicago crime rackets. It was far better for them to remain in the shadows and do their business privately, so to speak. So it was only a few years later, in 1986, that Anthony Spilotro was reported missing. Nobody was really too surprised, but there was an intense manhunt for several days in the western suburbs and around Chicago as his family was wondering what happened to Anthony Spilotro and his brother Michael, who was also reported missing at the time.
They're setting you up. No comment.
Perhaps that is a more appropriate question for Tony Spilotro this afternoon than it was 3 years ago. Then, the reputed manager of the mob's Las Vegas business had bonded out of Cook County Jail on a murder charge. Now, Spilotro and his brother Michael may be murder victims themselves, although they are officially listed as missing persons. 48-year-old Tony and 41-year-old Michael were last seen Saturday here at Michael's home in West Suburban Oak Park.
Last time they were seen, according to Ann, which is Michael's wife, was that they were seen about 2 p.m. on Saturday when they left the residence at 1102 South Maple. She has not seen or heard from them since.
Where were they going?
She did not indicate where they were going. Didn't know that they'd be out and they'd be back later.
They never returned, but the car they left in was found last night in the parking lot of this Schiller Park motel. A passing policeman noticed the 1986 Lincoln Mark 7, which had also been listed as missing. The FBI found no clues in the car, only a single golf club in the trunk, a driver, a couple of jackets in the back seat, a garage door opener, and a nickel on the front console. We found a cassette still in the dashboard tape player, the pre-recorded tape called James Bond 007. 13 originals. Bloodstains, weapons, anything unusual?
Nothing unusual that we can determine at this time.
What does that say to you? I mean, these people have just vanished?
Well, this time they're still missing. We don't know what happened to them. The car was parked out there. They could have certainly parked it. Somebody else could have certainly parked it. We have no knowledge of who parked the car there.
Tony Spilotro's wife, Nancy, seemed very surprised that the car was found in this lot just 5 minutes from O'Hare Airport. I spoke with Nancy Spilotro by phone at the family's home in Las Vegas. She would not say why she was concerned about the car's proximity to O'Hare, but the airport has traditionally been a favorite dumping spot for murdered mobsters. The airport might also be an easy place by which Spilotro would leave the country. But Nancy Spilotro told me she has not heard from her husband. She has no idea where he is. She has no idea what happened to him.
I just find it most unlikely. Most unlikely. I prefer to think that they're out on frolic and that they'll come walking home tonight, perhaps a little inebriated, and they'll have half the family angry at them. That is, their family angry at them. And he'll probably be facing divorce proceedings by tomorrow. That's what I prefer to think.
Tony Spilotro, once considered an heir to the crime syndicate throne in Chicago, has as of late been a liability, according to mafia observers. He is to be retried in Las Vegas beginning Monday for allegedly masterminding a burglary ring called the Hole-in-the-Wall Gang. He is still under federal indictment for his alleged role in outfit-operated casino skimming in Las Vegas. His brother, who manages this West Side restaurant and is a part-time actor, was charged in the Vegas burglary ring, but the case was dropped. He is currently under indictment on federal extortion charges, all of which leads Oak Park investigators to speculate that the Spilotros are being kept quiet by the mob's method of choice, murder.
The possibility does exist, naturally, considering the background of both individuals.
The Spilotro name was one of the best-known crime syndicate names in Chicago history. And not only Tony Spilotro, but his brother Michael. But really, Tony Spilotro was known as the man out in Las Vegas. Spilotro was only 5 feet 5 inches tall and 150 pounds, but he was considered to be a crime syndicate heavyweight. And when he came home that summer in 1986 to report for a mob sit-down, as they called it, basically a disciplinary hearing to find out what in the world was happening out in Las Vegas, Spilotro was no longer calling the shots. It was his upper crust managers in the Chicago mob. They wanted to know what Spilotro was doing and why, and they knew that it was the end of the road for Tony Spilotro. And when he was found in a cornfield with his brother buried that day in 1986, even though at the time there weren't nearly as many television stations or news organizations in Chicago, it was an hour south into northwest Indiana, and there were hundreds of reporters and news crews represented out there that day when the bodies were found.
Well, there were two. I got there after the first, first was already out, and the second one was deep, over my head, I would say.
2 men?
I believe. I don't want to say for sure.
Yeah.
It looked like they had been shot.
I can't say.
Were they in suits?
No.
No.
Naked?
Leisure clothes?
No. It was very hard to tell. They'd been in the ground.
About 3 foot down, we ran into the first body. Of course,
State Wildlife Division Supervisor Dick Hudson and a friend discovered the bodies last night. A farmer who leases this state land just north of Morocco, Indiana, had called them to say it looked like something had been buried near the edge of his new corn crop. After a little digging, Hudson made the grisly find.
We hit him somewhere along in the side. I told Dylan, hey, this don't look like any animal skin I've ever seen unless it's human. And we dug around a little bit till we came to his skivvies or his underwear, and we decided that was far enough and we left.
As has been the case in many mafia hits, both victims were only wearing their underwear. Sources say that shows they now may hide nothing. Indiana State Police tonight say one Spilotro had on cotton shorts, the other exotic nylon see-through underwear. Their clothes have not been found.
I think you have to say, after viewing the crime scene, that in certain aspects of the double homicide were botched by the assassins or by the murderers. The depth of the hole goes at least 5 feet. It's very, very clear to us from a law enforcement perspective that the persons responsible for this left the scene of the crime with the anticipation that the remains would not ever be found.
Anthony Little Tony Spilotro and his brother Michael were not found for 9 days. The only sign of the pair was their Lincoln Mark 7 automobile, found parked in a motel parking lot near O'Hare Field. Federal agents tonight believe the Spilotros were driven to Indiana in this car, which is believed to have been torched after the brothers were buried. The burned-out automobile was found about 2 miles due west of the gravesite, right down there. The car roughly halfway to a farm, reportedly once owned by jailed Chicago godfather Joseph Joey O'Brien Iupa. Could it be that the Spilotros were driven down here believing they were to meet with fellow mobsters at Iupa's secluded rural home?
I would have to say yes, it does pique our interest, yes.
He still owns that farm?
he still own that farm?
I have no further questions about Mr. Ayupa. Thank you.
Even though the FBI was processing an active crime scene in that cornfield back in 1986, they really developed very few clues and made no immediate arrests. In fact, to this day, no one has ever been brought to justice specifically for the murders of Anthony and Michael Spilotro. There have been insinuations in various court cases over the years as to who was responsible, believed to be a team of relatively high-ranking mafia members in Chicago who put together a group of people one afternoon and lured the Spilotros to a home in Bensonville, and according to at least one witness who was involved in the beatings, or claimed to be, took them into the basement and essentially beat them to death there, and then drove them down to Indiana, where they were then buried in this cornfield, only to be found a few days later by a farmer.
The battered remains of Anthony and Michael Spilotro arrived by hearse tonight here at the Salerno Funeral Home on the far west side. The bodies of the gangland victims left Indiana University Medical Center here in Indianapolis late this afternoon following completion of autopsies. Tonight, the 5-foot deep hole where the Spilotros were temporarily buried has been filled in, while Indiana State Police detectives poked through areas bordering the cornfield looking for clues.